bees is another story altogether. So what they found in New Zealand was about 0.3 of a nanogram per gram of honey. Now that's a 1,000 millionth of a gram, less than 1,000 millionth of a gram of these chemicals in the honey. That sort of level of these chemicals isn't actually enough, according to most published studies, to cause real harm to these bees, either sublethal effects even. So it's slightly lower than what we'd expect to see damage to the bee populations.
Isn't the point with the use of these neonics is that they are somewhat better than sort of vast aerial indiscriminate spraying, and also that in the kind of agricultural systems we have now, for better or worse, it would be better if we didn't have insecticides. We still need them in order to grow enough crops to feed people.
Exactly. I think nobody wants to see pesticides in their honey, least of all the bees, right? So the bees are the most susceptible to everything of these chemicals rather than humans or anything else. Nobody wants these in there. But the chemicals, we need some chemicals for use in growing our food right at the moment. So we need some sort of chemicals. Neonics can be problematic. They probably are problematic in some areas, like vast areas of the US, where there were higher levels of neonics than what we observed here. We can't rule out that they're damaging our bees here, but we can say, look, these levels they're there, but they are pretty low and not necessarily damaging, to the best of our knowledge, not necessarily damaging.
Okay, but I wouldn't mind cramming a couple of points in a question to you.
Yep.
These pesticides are likely to harm many more insects, not just bees, is the suggestion.
Yep.
The suggestion is that governments need to step in and be prepared to compensate farmers in the event that crops are lost to pests. We need to be using far fewer pesticides, and we need those kinds of options. Do you think that'd be viable, Phil?
It would be lovely not to use pesticides at all. I think everybody would be happy, maybe with the exception of the pesticide company. But no grower wants to spend money on pesticides when you don't have to. I think most growers are environmentally friendly and want not to hurt bee populations or other beneficial insects. They want to kill the pests. And that was a benefit of the neonics initially, that it was thought we can soak the seeds, we can not have to spray environments, we can direct the pesticides just to those species that are attacking the plants. Unfortunately, these neonics are expressed in the nectar and in the pollen, so you can get flow-on effects from the plant to beneficial insects like bees.
All right. One quick question to close. We need insects, and we hear about them disappearing. Yep. What happens if we reach a tipping point, Phil, with not enough of them on the planet?
Yeah, that becomes a real problem. And in places like China, areas in China, that has happened where bees just don't live there anymore, and there's massive shortages of pollination. So, then they have to look for alternatives, even like hand-pollinating plants over there, which is a pretty big effort. We don't want to reach that, but I think we're a ways off that in New Zealand at the moment.
All right, this sounds a bit more optimistic. Thank you, Phil. Phil Lester on the panel. Along with Finlay McDonald and Claire Matthews, who've shared the hour with us today. Thank you, Finlay.
Thank you very much.
Always good to see you. And Claire, always nice to have you on too.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, everybody. We are back with the panel tomorrow, and we await John Campbell now with Checkpoint.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight we ask what makes a 15-year-old get in 2 high-speed police pursuits in less than 3 weeks. I went to South Auckland to talk to people. I spoke to a worker who's a youth worker who's worked with children like Morocco for decades, and to a young man aged 17 who stole his first car when he was 12. It is a fascinating interview. Also tonight, the coalition negotiations continue. These really are the days of our lives. Las Vegas police reveal Stephen Paddock shot a security guard in the leg 6 minutes before he opened fire on concert goers last Sunday night, in a massive landslide the size of half a rugby field in that shopping centre car park on Auckland's North Shore. Was the council's too slow to react?
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The negotiations at Parliament are set to run into the evening as Labour and National try to strike a deal with New Zealand First to form a new government. The pace of the talks is sped up with Winston Peters' self-imposed deadline of Thursday looming. Here's our Deputy Political Editor Chris Bramwell.
Winston Peters and his team are in their second meeting with Labour after 2 hours this morning. After this morning's meeting, the Labour leader, Jacinda Ardern, would only say the talks were going well and were aimed at New Zealand's economic and social progress. Mr Peters is giving nothing away, though he did suggest exporters would be pleased with the outcome of the talks. He has also made it clear that his Thursday deadline is to make a decision about who New Zealand First will go with, but it may not necessarily be when he announces that decision. Atu i te whare pārimata, ko Chris Bramwell aho.
The former rugby coach of the Auckland teenager who died fleeing police says he was good-natured but had a rocky upbringing. 15-year-old Morocco Tai was killed driving a stolen car during a police pursuit in Otara yesterday. The police say he was a passenger last month in a car being driven at speed on the wrong side of Auckland's southern motorway. The coach for junior rugby at Hora Hora Club in Whangarei, Parole, says when Morocco joined the team 4 years ago, he was fearless and always supported other players.
He was kind of a hard luck kid, which I was pretty surprised by the nature of him when he came to us. That he was actually a really, really good-natured boy, considering all the stuff that they'd been through. From what I can remember, they'd actually changed quite a few places and been flung right out to family and gone here, there and everywhere.
Paul says there needs to be better whānau and community support for teens like Morocco to prevent bad decision-making. A woman imprisoned for defrauding the government of more than $700,000 has been taking counselling programs to free herself from what she calls a jail constructed in her own head. Joanne Harrison was denied parole last week after being sentenced in February to 3 years and 7 months in jail for stealing from the Ministry of Transport. Jessie Chang reports.
In a full decision released today, Joanne Harrison's lawyer told the parole board she would not be in a position to reoffend in a similar way. He said Harrison has successfully completed all counselling opportunities available to her and she wishes to return to the UK when released. But the board wasn't satisfied that was sufficient to ensure Harrison wouldn't reoffend. It is seeking confirmation overseas she hasn't been convicted of similar charges before. Harrison's next parole hearing is in March. Ko Jessie Chang aho.
9 people were arrested in a protest in Wellington today outside a conference by the New Zealand Defence Industry Association. About 300 protesters have been blocking entrances to Westpac Stadium since this morning in a bid to stop delegates getting into the conference. Some protesters say they were manhandled by police when they refused to move. The police say 8 people were arrested for obstructing a public road and 1 for disorderly behaviour. They say they're disappointed some protesters disrupted traffic, created safety issues and caused delays for the wider public. Inspector Neil Banks says officers remained professional and acted appropriately. He says anyone concerned about police conduct can make a complaint. Auckland Transport does not believe nearby construction activity is to blame for a massive slip in a car park. It says heavy rain has caused the damage in the Rawini Road car park in Birkenhead, where about 30 spaces have disappeared. Its Chief Infrastructure Officer, Greg Edmonds, says it's been monitoring the site for more than a year and cracks appeared a few weeks ago. He says the car park was built on a landfill site in the 1960s and engineers need to let the subsidence settle before it assesses what to do. The Birkenhead Town Centre Association says businesses are losing millions of dollars a year in revenue because of long-standing problems with the car park. Raging wildfires in Northern California have killed at least 10 people and forced thousands from their homes. In what is one of the worst firestorms in the state's history, hundreds of firefighters are battling a number of blazes in the Sonoma and Napa regions, which have already destroyed 1,500 homes and businesses. Local reporter Jackie Ward is in Santa Rosa.
At one point, 15 fires were burning in this area that is just about an hour north of San Francisco. It's known for its tourism and vineyards, and 73,000 acres were burning. Firefighters had to delay fighting those actual flames to make sure everyone got out safely. 20,000 people are estimated to have evacuated. Complete neighborhoods have vanished, fallen victim to fast-moving flames that quickly overtook entire streets.
Jackie Ward from Santa Rosa in Northern California. It's 5:05. Sport. After a review, the try by the All Blacks centre Ryan Crotty in the narrow win against South Africa on Sunday morning has been ruled legitimate. Crotty's try sparked outrage in South Africa after the 25-24 win in Cape Town, with suggestions he knocked on or failed to ground properly after swooping on a loose ball behind the line. The try was awarded after long deliberations by the television match official, but the Sanzar referees boss Lyndon Bray says the official got it right. Women's World Tennis number 5, Venus Williams, has turned her back on Auckland's ASB Classic, opting to play in the Sydney International event in January instead. In recent years, Williams, a 7-time Grand Slam winner, has used the Auckland event as the stepping stone to her Australian Open campaign, playing there for the past 4 years, winning the 2015 event. She and sister Serena, the former world number 1, were the star attractions of this year's ASB Classic, but both were eliminated in the early rounds. The International Cricket Council is set to confirm plans at a meeting in Auckland this week for a new World Test Championship. The new competition is seen as a way of increasing the popularity of the 5-day format. The plan is for the 9 Test-playing nations to play home and away series over 2 years, with the top 2 teams meeting in a final. That's the news.
Trolley buses to go.
There's quite a few people that just want to come in, go for a ride, because it's nice and quiet, eh? Yeah, we're going to miss the trolley, eh?
A car park disappears.
We've essentially lost around about $8 million worth of economic benefit to the area, because each car park is worth something to our local businesses. And car parks are scarce in our area right now.
And fixing the airbags.
To compulsorily take the vehicle off the road to have the airbag replaced, because the risk of failure is too great to the safety of life if it's not replaced.
In the driving seat, Guy Espiner and Susie Ferguson. Morning Report, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, the Wellington factory recycling plastic bottles into food trays for the first time in New Zealand. And after 10, Booker Prize-winning Tasmanian author Richard Flanagan on his new novel, First Person, ghostwriting and the perils of trying to write truthfully about real life. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland, fine spells and a few showers clearing tomorrow morning. Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Mainly fine, scattered showers, isolated thunderstorms possible. Gisborne to Wairarapa this afternoon. Waikato to Kapiti Coast, including the central high country, scattered showers turning to rain overnight with isolated thunderstorms possible, easing tomorrow afternoon. Wellington, fine at first, apart from isolated showers. Rain developing tonight, then easing to showers tomorrow afternoon. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, scattered showers today, mainly inland with isolated thunderstorms possible, turning to rain for a time tomorrow morning. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, rain in Fiordland spreading elsewhere this afternoon and evening with isolated thunderstorms possible in Bulla, easing to showers tomorrow. Otago and Southland mainly fine, but a few showers developing this afternoon. Isolated thunderstorms possible this afternoon, and for the Chatham Islands, cloudy with rain setting in this afternoon. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina, and thank you everyone for being with us. Coming up on the program tonight, Coalition Talks. Chris Bramwell on day 3, the protests against the so-called Weapons Expo in Wellington. Our reporter Emma Hatton was there, and Zach Fleming and the slip on the North Shore. Could it have been prevented? Should it have been prevented? But we begin tonight with Morocco Tai, who died yesterday in a police pursuit driving a stolen car, aged just 15. What makes a boy do that? What makes the driver of the stolen car he was a passenger in drive the wrong way down the southern motorway 2.5 weeks ago? We can't ask Morocco Tai. But today I went to Otara to ask a man who's worked with kids like Morocco for decades. And then I met one of them. At 17, he stole his first car 5 years ago. He's a dad now and wants to inspire his own son to do much, much better. Now, a clear warning. There's a couple of incidents of language in this story that you don't often hear on RNZ. We normally beep them, but that's how Josh speaks, and the words are said without any desire to offend, and more than that, this is his reality. And if we're worried about his language, perhaps we should be more concerned about the story he tells. I am at the children's playground, and all the kids here are young. Pearl, Barley. Wait, here comes a ball towards me. I can never resist that. And all the kids here are young, but there is somebody who's even older than me. As I talk, he drives in. Sully! Sully is Sully Paya, a youth worker who's given much of his life to young people in this community.
Hey, John.
Hey, Sully.
How's it going?
Yeah, good.
To see you.
Nice to see you. I've come to discuss Morocco Tai with Sully. Not Morocco himself, Sully didn't know him, but how at just 15 a boy can care so little for his life that he's involved in 2 high-speed police pursuits in a fortnight, one going the wrong way on the southern motorway, the next one that killed him. Where are we, Sully? This is the Mayfield Reserve, is it?
This is Pearl Baker Drive.
Sully's arrived with bikes and a basketball hoop on his trailer. Children begin arriving, delighted by this visitor. I go for a walk a few houses down the street. There's a family outside one of them.
Mr. Campbell, mate.
What's your first name?
Josh.
Josh, it's really nice to meet you, Josh.
Yeah.
And who's this little person here?
That's my son, Braxton.
He's beautiful, isn't he?
Yeah, his birthday's on Saturday if you just want to pop over.
How old is Braxton turning?
He's 21.
He's a lovely boy. Braxton's alert, smiling at me, his eyes full of sparkle. And Josh? So how old are you?
I'm only 17.
And your dad?
Yeah.
You love being a dad?
Exactly. Changed my life.
I asked Josh how, and his answer was extraordinary. We'll return to him, a dad at 17, his hopes now and his life so far. But Sully knows these kids. Much of a lifetime ago, he was one.
I lived here since the late 60s. And I knew the place. I was with the Stormtrooper gang when it first started here.
Why did you join the Stormtroopers, Sully?
Again, it's looking for identity. It's a big issue. A lot of kids, a lot of young people today don't have identity. They don't know who they are. They don't know who their roots are. They don't know where they belong.
And wait until we go back to Josh. He says exactly that. Sully says the issue is success, or the lack of it, the way failure after failure changes your hopes and dreams, drowns them.
When a child is failing and can't read at primary level, by the time you reach the intermediate and high school, you already failed. So you're destined to fail. And so they get to a point where they realize that, hey, I can't go any further than this. There's no hope for me. So they just veer off and took off in another direction.
Another direction? Gangs, crime, drugs, alcohol, cars, and driving them fast, anything they can do to get themselves noticed. Not much for some of them to lose.
At one point in my life, I was in that situation where you have that attitude of stuff everybody, stuff you. Yeah, I'll do my own thing. I'll be my own boss, and nobody will tell me what to do, and nobody's going to stop me. It's because of that emptiness inside. That anger causes you to be angry about the world, angry about family, angry about everything, angry of being poor, poverty, angry of failures, and it puts you in a position where there's no hope. When you lose hope, you're lost, totally lost. So that's what a lot of our youth today that are facing. They're facing that emptiness, that loneliness, like a tunnel that you cannot see the light at the end of it. You just keep going in the dark place. And that's what a lot of them are. That's where a lot of them are.
It's where Josh was. Remember Josh? Braxton's dad, aged just 17 and already with that life behind him. Let's pick up where we left Josh last time. And your dad?
Yeah.
You love being a dad?
Exactly. Changed my life.
Did it? In what way?
Yeah, everywhere he just got me out of the trouble, troubled life.
So if you are out of a troubled life at 17, how old were you when you were in the troubled life?
12, 13. Stealing cars, doing everything.
Stealing cars at 12 or 13?
Yeah. Robbing shops. You name it, I've done it, Crashing cars through walls. Everything.
You're telling me the truth, aren't you?
Nothing but the truth, sir.
Why did you do that, Josh?
Me? I was just troubled, needed a bit of money, had working follows after money, eh? So had to give it back somehow.
And also, did you not care really whether you lived or died? Is it?
It's not more or less caring whether you lived or died, eh? You're just pretty much not even in that mind state, eh? You're not thinking about dying, eh? You're just thinking about cracking it, really, eh? And then coming home.
Cracking what? Cracking it? When you say cracking it, what are you cracking?
Making money. If you made money, then you've cracked it, eh? Pretty much.
And how were you making money?
Everywhere possible.
Tell me, what were you doing?
Anything, sir. Anything. Anything and anything. That's the truth.
At 12 or 13?
Yeah.
Sully knows them, was them, sees them every day. Can't believe those of us who don't know them don't realise they're there. These are also our children, he says, and some of them are growing up with no hope.
And that's what I see in many of our kids here, is that they grow up in an environment where there's a lot of negativity. A lot of that failure. And they carry that with them. So my job is to look at them and say, hey man, you can do well, you can do much better, you can be just as good as anyone else.
Who funds you, Sully? Who funds your work?
Right now I'm retired and I'm not funded. I just do this for love. I'm not getting any funding from anywhere.
Is there enough money coming into this community to help?
Zero at the moment.
So Sully plays Big Brother for free. Dad, the kind of male role model who asks you about your day and cares enough to actually listen to the answer. Josh lost his dad and reckons men you can look up to are precious.
Pretty much everyone around here, they ain't got a dad, then they ain't got a solid male figure in their life, then they're going to turn to the street life.
And so you're a dad now, right, of Braxton?
Yeah, exactly, that's why I started young. And so I'm going to be around and make sure he fucking lives the good life.
And you really feel the responsibility of being a dad?
Most definitely.
Josh says Braxton, turning 1 this weekend, isn't going to steal cars at 12 and 13. Josh has got a job, he's got ambitions, and for the first time since he was very little, he's got dreams. What changed you?
My son. That was the motivation right there to change my life, so he doesn't have to see any of that shit growing up.
It is shit, isn't it?
Exactly. It's shit, but it is the way of life around here.
Are there lots of kids your age who've lived through that stuff? Do you know lots of boys?
Heaps. There's thousands. There's thousands of us.
And why? What's gone wrong to make so many kids with so little to lose? What's happened?
Drugs and alcohol. No food in the fridges, we gotta make it somehow.
And did anyone encourage you? Did anyone tell you were a good boy growing up? Did anyone give you a sense of possibility? Did anyone tell you to aim high? Any of that kind of stuff?
All our teachers hate us, see? Because we influenced the others to be bad too.
So you were just a nuisance at school, were you?
Yeah, that's what they thought, eh? Oh, well, I'm here now. Hey, I'm still surviving.
Not only that, you're going up, aren't you?
Exactly. That's it.
And that's what youth today needs. Youth today needs someone there. Someone to bring them alongside and say, hey, keep going. Keep going, and give them the support that they need. When you see them going off the rail, grab them. Yeah, that's really where I'm at. Hey, what's up?
We've just been joined by a couple of delightful young guys. What's your first name?
Sefa.
Sefa. And how old are you, Sefa?
9.
You look like a lovely young man, Sefa. Really nice to meet you. Look at the sparkle in Sefa's eyes, Sully.
Yeah. My dream is that to give every child an opportunity to do well. And they will do well.
Sully Paia talking to me in Otara this afternoon. News just coming in of a very serious crash north of Taupo. We have the statement from police. There are diversions in place in relation to a serious crash on State Highway 1 and Tutuko Road that occurred around 3:15. The crash is serious. Emergency services are likely to be at the scene for some time. Motorists are asked to use either State Highway 5 or 30 to avoid the scene, or use the diversions suggested by people who are obviously north or south of it. Diversion for south to north is at Tirohanga Road, and State Highway 1. Division for north to south is at Oru Anui Road and State Highway 1. Media will be updated on injuries. The police are saying, we understand it is a multiple injury and potentially a multiple fatality collision just north of Taupo on State Highway 1. The moment we get more, we will bring it to you, of course. It's 20 minutes past 5. A massive landslide's destroyed part of a car park on Auckland's North Shore, leaving local business owners irate because they say warning signs appeared months ago. The Birkenhead Business Association says vibration and drilling from the construction of new apartment buildings nearby caused the slip, but Auckland Council says the car park gave way because of rain. Zach Fleming has been to visit.
The size of half a rugby field gone. Around a third of the Rawene car park in Birkenhead crumbled away. Local business owners say they noticed cracks months ago.
I park there every day, so I noticed it, and it was like a centimetre or two, and every day it got bigger, and suddenly they closed it off, and over the last 2-3 weeks it sunk, and every day another 10-20 centimetres, and now it's 10 metres down.
Chris Ott owns Ott Patisserie, a 2-minute walk from the now gaping hole. He believes it's a direct result of the foundations being laid for an apartment block next door.
And since they started drilling at the back of it, that was when the first cracks appeared.
Mr. Ott says he didn't see council staff checking on the cracks until it was too late. Paul Davies, who owns CrossFit Birkenhead, you can see the car park from his back door, says he never saw anyone checking either.
Auckland Transport, however, says it's been monitoring the site for the past year, and the landslip is just a result of natural subsidence caused by recent heavy rain.
We've had pretty significant rain and weather over the last 12 months or so. You can see across Auckland we've had stormwater damage, and this is kind of probably part of that issue. It looks like it's an uncontrolled fill that's been covered over as a car park, and so we don't think that there's any issue with the surrounding construction site.
Chief Infrastructure Officer Greg Edmonds says it will be a few days before geotechnical engineers can be 100% sure what caused the slip. Checkpoint counted at least a dozen council staff in high-vis gear there today. And Mr Edmonds disputes local business owners who believe council was slow to act.
At the end of the day, we closed parts of the car park when we considered it to be unsafe, and we've continued to monitor it since then.
The slips worsened bad blood between the council, business owners and developers of the nearby apartment building, Wade Construction, which leased 25 of Rawene's 116 car parks.
They paid, what I hear, $60,000 for it, so it's $20 per car park, which everyone would be happy to pay up here too. But there must have been a buddy business going on with someone from the council and the developer.
Business owners say those 25 car parks put a noticeable dent in foot traffic. And now with around 25 more gone thanks to the slip, Rawene car parks now nearly halved.
We don't have space to park, our customers don't have spaces, so it reduces the amount of people which go through Birkenhead.
Local MP Jonathan Coleman says he's organised a meeting for 11 a.m. tomorrow,
where Auckland Transport are going to come and explain in plain language to local business owners and residents, what exactly has happened. So I've told AT would be a good idea to not only listen to business owners, but also to come to the meeting with a range of possible options to support parking capacity here in Birkenhead.
Mr Coleman says he expects a full investigation. Auckland Council says it's confident the slip won't worsen, but it will continue to monitor it to be sure. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
Let's head to Wellington. Serious, productive, meaningful. The adjectives flowed along with the biscuits today as Labour and National continued to try to woo, court, whatever you call it, New Zealand First into forming a government. The parties are in back-to-back meetings as Winston Peters' self-imposed deadline of October 12 looms. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
Labour's leader Jacinda Ardern leads her negotiating team into this morning's meeting with a couple of packets of biscuits perfectly balanced on top of her notes. Ginger nuts and chocolate wheatons were the bickies of choice. Read into that what you will, as that's about all the political media has to go on these days, with politicians staying mum about the details of the talks. The meeting with New Zealand First lasted just over 2 hours, after which Ms Ardern told reporters it was another productive session.
We anticipate that we'll be meeting both with the Green Party this afternoon and again with New Zealand First this afternoon to continue our policy discussions. Our meetings have focused on our shared ideas, areas where we want to make sure that we progress New Zealand socially and economically, and that's where our focus continues to be. Thanks.
Not long after that, Winston Peters told reporters in Bowen House that progress is being made and he's not looking at pushing out his decision deadline of Thursday.
We're not talking about that. We're sticking with our talks now. They're going very well. They're very serious, very meaningful, and we'll get through the program.
Mr Peters did, however, suggest exporters would be pleased with the outcome of the talks and referred to the sale of ANZ subsidiary UDC Finance to Chinese conglomerate HNA Group.
The reason why the Overseas Investment Office doesn't know a recent deal done by the ANZ Bank, right, for the last 8 months. That's the kind of sad country we have become, and that's what we intend to address in these coalition talks, or whatever they might be.
And as the lift doors closed, the critical question remained unanswered.
How are the biscuits? Because you're behaving like a bunch of clowns.
How are the biscuits, Mr Peters?
About half an hour later, Winston Peters reappeared and bustled off to meet with National's negotiating team. Not long after he disappeared down the corridor, the Greens leader James Shaw appeared ready for talks with Labour. He told reporters that his party would be able to have any deal squared away by the membership and would not hold up any agreement between New Zealand First and Labour.
We've got a process that we can move through it very quickly. So,
do you have sort of an almost pre-approval situation where you've given signals?
No, we've got to go to them. We've got to go to them, but we're able to call a meeting pretty quickly.
James Shaw was questioned about whether he would be seeking a meeting with New Zealand First, but he insisted his dealings were with Labour only. Winston Peters bridled when he was asked about meeting with the Greens.
For months and months, in fact for years, they all campaigned together, hugging each other, embracing each other and loving each other.
So
we didn't. I don't know why you asked me this question.
After his afternoon meeting with National, Mr Peters was asked if he would be announcing his decision on Thursday.
I didn't say that. I said, well, we're in a position to make a decision on Thursday. That's what I said from word go.
So will you take it to your board on Thursday then?
Look, can I handle the New Zealand First political side of it, and the board will handle their side of it, and we'll coordinate that together, and we'll let you know when it's relevant for you to know what the outcome is.
Labour's second meeting with New Zealand First started at 4 o'clock this afternoon. National will also get a second go today, meeting with New Zealand First later this evening. Atu i te whare pari mata mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Chris Bramwell ahau.
27 minutes past 5. 9 people were arrested in a protest in Wellington today, which activists say turned violent. About 300 protesters blocked all entrances to Westpac Stadium this morning in a bid to stop delegates from attending what they say is a weapons trade fair. Emma Hatton was there.
With arms linked and voices chanting, dozens of protesters blocked the entryways into Westpac Stadium as busloads of delegates arrived. The delegates were there for an annual event organised by the New Zealand Defence Industry Association, which hosts some of the largest weapons manufacturers in the world. Peace Action Wellington's Jessie Dennis says they're against the weapons trade and it needs to be stopped.
We don't think that anyone should profit from war, so we're here to shut down the Weapons Expo. Inside, representatives from some of the largest weapons manufacturers in the world are meeting, representing an industry whose prime purpose is profiting from violence.
The chair of the Defence Industry Association, Scott Orell, says it isn't a weapons expo, but a 2-day event designed to showcase the latest in defence technologies to 500 global delegates.
It's very much part of a big picture. The New Zealand Defence Force, the Army, Navy and the Air Force and other government agencies need tools and services to go about their job, and we all work hand in hand to make sure that what the government decides to do with the forces and with its national security agencies, that they've got the tools to do it safely.
Another protest organiser, Gael Idamelgoda, disagrees, saying a message needs to be sent that the arms business is not welcome in Wellington, given war causes suffering for millions of people worldwide. He says many people share this view and have come from all over the country to get involved.
Here there are many groups. There are people from the Polynesian Panthers, local iwi,
Catholic workers and, faith groups. So it's quite a diverse sort of group of people. People have come here from outside of Wellington to show their support for the Peace Action Wellington movement here.
Protesters, Helen and Ellie, sat on the ground, linking arms to stop people getting through.
We have actually stopped quite a lot of the arms dealers going in, so we're really happy that they're not able to continue their profiting from war in our Cape Town here in Wellington.
Ellie says it quickly turned sour.
They dragged me across the ground by my backpack. They've been punching people, kicking people, shoving people. It's been absolutely atrocious.
Sarah Cowdell, who made the 8-hour journey from Auckland for the protest, agreed and says there was a lot of tension and yelling.
People get riled up. There's definitely a lot of people yelling and kind of refusing to move. Our whole point of non-violence is that we're not attacking or punching or doing any of that, but we are willing to stand our ground and not move.
Despite the clashes with police, protester T. Lamousse says they're determined to put a halt to the 2-day conference and will return tomorrow.
Every time a bomb drops on a Palestinian village, people at this Expo get money in their pockets. We are hoping to stop the Expo from continuing as best we can, make it as difficult as possible for people to engage in the global weapons industry.
The police say a number of protesters were warned, but 9 people were arrested, including 8 for obstructing a public roadway and 1 for disorderly behaviour. They say they are disappointed protesters behaved in a way that created safety issues, disrupted traffic and caused delays for the wider public. In a statement, they say they must balance the lawful right to protest against the public's right to go about their daily business without being disrupted by protest action. For Checkpoint, Emma Hatton.
Coming up on Checkpoint, the latest on that serious car crash on State Highway 1 just north of Taupo. Parents and educators say children with high needs are being denied a full and fair education due to a lack of specialised teachers and training resources. And at least 10 people have been killed and 20,000 evacuated in Northern California in what officials say is one of the worst fire days in the state's history. Nona is next with business. But with the time at 29 minutes to 6, here's Katrina with the headlines.
Negotiations at Parliament are set to run into the evening as Labour and National try to strike a deal with New Zealand First on forming a new government. Winston Peters and his team are in their second meeting with Labour today, and Mr Peters now says his Thursday deadline is for a decision about who New Zealand First will go with, not necessarily when he'll announce that decision. The former rugby coach of an Auckland teenager killed during a police pursuit says young people need more support to avoid bad decision-making. Morocco Tai, who was 15, was killed when the stolen car he was driving in Otara yesterday crashed. He was caught last month in a car speeding along the wrong side of Auckland's southern motorway. The coach for junior rugby at Hora Hora Club in Whangarei, Corey Paul, says Morocco was a good-natured boy who had a rocky upbringing. He says better support is needed for teenagers who move between family members a lot. 9 people were arrested in a protest in Wellington today outside a conference by the Defence Industry Association at Westpac Stadium. The police say 8 people were arrested for obstructing a public road and 1 for disorderly behaviour. Some protesters say they were manhandled when they refused to move, but the police say officers remained professional. At least 10 people have been killed and 20,000 people evacuated in Northern California in what officials say is one of the worst fire days in the state's history. Firefighters are battling more than a dozen fires which broke out almost simultaneously in the Napa and Sonoma regions. The police have charged a teenage boy with robbing a dairy in Gore last week. The owner of the Coots Road dairy in the Southland town had his hand cut fighting off 3 balaclava-clad robbers, one wielding a machete, in the robbery last Thursday evening. The police say a 15-year-old has appeared in youth court on charges of aggravated robbery and aggravated wounding. They say they're still hunting for 2 others. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Thank you very much, Katrina. Let's turn to business news now with Nona Peltier, who is on the other side of me in the Auckland studio. Hi, Nona.
Hello.
Electronic card spending largely fat in September. Now, largely fat is moderately interesting, but it really undershot expectations, didn't it?
It really did.
Why, and what does that tell us about the economy?
Yeah, you know, it's a complicated thing. In some ways, it's just the election, pre-election, post-election blahs. I mean, you know, people are always a little uncertain around elections, and especially when you've got an MMP situation, so there's no clear-cut finish to it. Yeah, so maybe things will pick up a little bit because of that. Also, housing, the cooling housing market. So there's not as many houses changing hands, so to speak. So less buying, consumer spending in that respect. Also, fuel prices are down. So, rather up. That offset some of that spending in September. So when you take the fuel out of it, so they came up a little bit. When you take fuel out, actually it fell 0.2%. So core sales were really down.
Literally down.
Yeah, they really were down. People spent more on fuel, okay, so that was one of the reasons why the top line number was a little higher, but they also spent more on groceries and liquor, and we've seen that trend. So, I guess some people are not buying houses, they're just drinking up large, I suppose. I'm not really sure. Now, other things that were down were clothing, appliances, and going out. So, I guess people are probably spending a little less, not exactly sure why. The statistics said they couldn't really link it to elections, but analysts, economists and so on are kind of linking it to the elections. So let's just see what happens with that.
Yeah, and it's convenient for the economists to link it to the elections because if they do so, they don't have to look at any...
Well, they did look at a number of things, and one of the things they were talking about was an absence of renewed fall in interest rates, okay? So, we had, last year we had, some movement on interest rates, and people had an expectation that they might come down. Well, they didn't. Interest rates did not come down necessarily. So, people are carrying debt. We're a highly indebted nation. And so maybe people are thinking, I'll keep my money in my wallet and leave it there for now until I find out what happens with the election. It's funny that, it really, in the end, we don't really know what kind of an outcome we're going to get, but you wouldn't have thought it'd be a whole lot different either which way we go. So we'll see what happens with that. Meanwhile, our market, share market, is still hitting those record highs. We're up 1/3% again today to 8,038, not 80,000 like I said yesterday. That's a 28-point rise. And the New Zealand dollar is a little change from yesterday at 70.7 US cents. That's lower than it's been. And again, that definitely is a reflection of the election. 90.8 Australians, so that's quite low, and 53.7 pence. So that's just slightly weaker tone than yesterday. Not a whole lot, and I think we'll probably see that change once we know what the outcome is.
Nona Peltier, thank you very much indeed. Police have revised their timeline of the Las Vegas mass shooting that left 58 people dead and more than 500 people injured. They revealed they had 6 minutes to reach gunman Stephen Paddock before he opened fire on the crowd. What's this timeline all about? Well, Zachary Goldman from Reuters has more.
Good afternoon.
A small change in the official timeline of the Las Vegas massacre, raising big questions about the police response. At a press conference Monday night, the Las Vegas police chief saying the gunman, Stephen Paddock, shot and injured a hotel security guard, Jesus Campos, before he opened fire on a country music concert.
What we have learned is Mr. Campos was encountered by the suspect prior to his shooting to the outside world.
Previously, cops had said the security guard was shot after Paddock started opening fire on the crowd, while first responders were scrambling to identify the source of the shooting. Police now saying Campos was checking out an alarm triggered by a door on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel on October 1st. The alarm was not associated with the door to the gunman's suite. At 9:59 p.m., Paddock shot through the door in his suite into the hallway, injuring Campos. 6 minutes later, Paddock started raining bullets on the 22,000 people attending the festival across the street. He fired for 10 minutes. 58 people were killed, more than 500 injured. At 10:15, the shooting stopped. It's only at 11:20 p.m., 80 minutes after the hotel security guard is shot, that police use an explosive charge to enter Paddock's hotel room. They found the gunman dead of a self-inflicted gunshot. Las Vegas police saying the security guard notified hotel security when he was shot. It's unclear if or when the hotel called the police. But if they did, officers may have had more time, 6 more minutes, to get to Paddock. 64-year-old Stephen Paddock amassed an arsenal of high-powered rifles, many of them legally modified to increase the rate of fire.
We believe he decided to take the lives he did, and he had a very purposeful plan that he carried out.
The large question looming over the mass murder, his motive, still unanswered more than a week later.
21 minutes to 6. We're going to go live now to Taupo and that serious accident this afternoon. We're joined now by the Mayor of the district, David Trewavis. Are you there, David?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Thank you for joining us. What can you tell us?
Well, John, it was just such a beautiful afternoon, unfortunately, and the rain had cleared up, and about 3:15 we've had a vehicle travelling south and a vehicle travelling north, approximately 20 k's north of Taupo, at a place called Tutukau Road, which is, you turn off to the famous Aoraki Karako geysers, tourist spot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And unfortunately, they've collided. Two cars have collided, basically just slightly north of a passing lane. And unfortunately, 4 have been confirmed as deceased at the scene. Very unfortunate circumstances. The roads are very busy at Taupo at the moment.
School holidays.
Appreciate school holidays, yeah. So, and 8 have been transferred via helicopters and ambulances to Waikato and Rotorua.
Gosh, that's devastating news. So, look, I think everyone who's driven State Highway 1 will know vaguely where we are. So north of Taupo, at some stage, if you're heading north, you turn left and you're still on State Highway 1 and you're heading to Tokoroa, right? But it's before that. It's before that turn off, is it?
Yes, that's right. So you're turning. You go north of Taupo, through Wairaki, heading towards Tokoroa. And you come to a road called Tutukau Road, which is Aoraki Karako.
There is the passing lane there, isn't there?
Passing lane right there. Yes, yeah. There has been some incidences there over the years as well, and there's been improvements made and what have you. But yes, busy road. And as I say, the conditions were well, from what's reported to me from the police, that the conditions were clear, because we've had a pretty murky couple of weeks.
Yeah, haven't we all? Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm so sorry. And so, obviously, it sounds like a head-on collision, doesn't it? And if it's at the end of a passing lane, it could potentially be at real speed, right?
Yes, possibly so. Obviously, everyone's still on the scene. The road's still detoured at this stage, so until everything's moved away. But all the deceased and injured, begin taken away as we speak.
Yeah, gosh, that's awful. And no word about the occupants and who they were, whether they were locals or people. No, nothing at all.
It's believed to be New Zealanders, so we're just obviously going through that process now.
Taupo District Mayor David Truavis, thank you so much, David. We really appreciate it. I've just been handed, in fact, a statement update. Taupo crash, 4 dead, exactly as David said. Police are now able to confirm that 4 people are dead following a collision in Taupo. Actually, it's just north of Taupo, isn't it? At the intersection of State Highway 1 and Tutukau Road. 4 people dead, 8 people injured, exactly as David is saying. The injured have been taken to Waikato or Rotorua hospitals. The road will be closed for a considerable time. Obviously, detours will be in place, but if you're heading north out of Taupo, if you're heading home after the end of a holiday or whatever, I suspect it would be a good idea to stay put for the time being. We'll update you on any more, but confirmation 4 dead and 8 injured. That sounds like an absolutely terrible collision on State Highway 1 north of Taupo. 17.5 to 6. Children with high needs such as autism are being denied a full and fair education due to a lack of specialised teachers, training and resources. Parents and educators say they're calling on the Ministry of Education to offer more support to mainstream schools so that they have the resources to not only manage children with high needs, but offer them the learning experience they, like all children, deserve. Michelle Cook reports.
Christine Cosgrove is at her wit's end. Her son Christian has been suspended from school 4 times in 5 years, and she says he'll be expelled if he's suspended once more. The 9-year-old has high-functioning autism and ADHD and receives just 1 or 2 hours of teacher aid time per day. He has sensory issues, so if it's too loud or busy, he gets confused and upset. If he feels cornered, he'll push, scream, hide or run. His mother fears no other school will accept him if he's expelled and says it's through no fault of his own.
He had an outburst with the teacher aide who got right in his face when he was escalated, and she did all the wrong things. She shouldn't have done that. They all should know what to do and how to be and, how to diffuse the situation, but they don't, and he gets punished for it. So I'm hearing so many stories now about children just like Christian that are ignored and left behind and are suffering in these schools. They're getting stood down, they're getting excluded, they're getting expelled, and then they've got nowhere to go.
Checkpoint has heard from more than 10 parents who say their children have been excluded from mainstream school or school activities due to behaviours associated with their disorders and disabilities, or because they are put in the too hard basket. One child was removed from Kapahaka group because they couldn't stand still or stop singing. Another was asked to stay home because their teacher aide had resigned, and another wasn't even invited to school camp, even though the parents were willing and able to attend. Ms Cosgrove is just one of the many parents who say they are tired of battling the system.
The reality is that he thinks completely differently to, a neurotypical child and needs a different type of education. And the problem is that's not being provided for children like Christian.
She says New Zealand needs more specialist teachers to meet the needs of children like Christian. His principal would not comment on an individual student, but agrees with Ms Cosgrove's call for change.
I think it's time there was action taken rather than just reviews.
That's Graham Barber, principal of Woodend School, north of Christchurch. He says there's nothing provided to schools to help them cope with children with high needs, such as autism, ADHD and fetal alcohol syndrome. Teachers are increasingly having to balance the needs of these children, while at the same time teaching another 30 or so students.
The system itself needs to provide more resourcing and time and specialised teachers to allow that, to allow schools to better meet the needs of all children, not just some of the children. And some of those children need teaching, specialised teaching, not just time from a teacher aide to manage their learning or to keep them in schools. They need specialised teaching, and that's missing.
Teachers gain a degree after training for 3 years, or postgraduate students can receive a diploma after 1 year of study. Autism New Zealand CEO Dane Dugan says they receive very minimal training in working with children who have high needs, such as autism, and that's a major flaw in the system.
The first step is to mandate, some type of autism training into the Teachers Training College, because if the stats out now, you're looking at 1 in 3 classrooms are going to have a child with autism in their class. And then secondly, there needs to clearly be more resource put into the system as well. So it's all well and good to talk about inclusion, but having a child sitting at the back of a classroom only engaging with the teacher aide, we don't really see that as inclusion. We just see that as more a tick the box exercise.
Lisa Tatum studied between 1997 and 1999 and remembers doing a course on English for speakers of other languages, known as ESOL, but nothing on children with special needs. She is currently studying a postgraduate diploma in specialist teaching, autism spectrum disorder, while teaching at a Northland primary school. She says one specialist teacher per 400 children would be a good start, but one specialist teacher per child with high needs would be ideal. Ms Tatum believes there will continue to be very little support if there isn't far better training.
I think there needs to be a real clear pathway. It's not just a paper, this is special education, this is what you're going to find, because you need to really be very proactive when you're working with these children. They are difficult.
Parents are calling for the ministry to inject more money and resources into education so their children aren't left behind, but they also say the attitudes of some principals and teachers need to change. Ms Tatum agrees.
I've worked with teachers, good friends who have said, I won't have that child in my class. I don't know how to deal with that child. I've done no training in special ed, and I frankly don't want them in my class. And these are people who are beautiful people, and they're fantastic teachers, but they don't want them in their class.
The Education Review Office found 3/4 of schools in New Zealand demonstrated mostly inclusive practices, so 1/4 of schools didn't. The Ministry of Education said in a statement that it was helping schools to become more inclusive in a number of ways, including by providing professional learning development and individual specialist support.
Where the Ministry is informed about practices that are exclusive of students with disabilities, they will follow up. A range of support is available to schools to assist them to be more inclusive. Updates to the Education Act provide more opportunities for the Ministry to intervene where they have significant concerns about a school. Interventions could include engaging specialist help or convening a case conference where there's disagreement between parents and a board of trustees. Because the case conference is a statutory process, the resolutions are binding. If there's no agreement, the Ministry can adjudicate.
The Ministry says trainee teachers learn about working with children with a range of disability and behavioural issues, and qualified teachers can complete postgraduate programs in specialist education. Dane Dugan says the Ministry is working to diagnose children at an earlier age, and people are increasingly becoming aware of the needs of children on the autism spectrum.
But I think at the end of the day, right now, it's a little bit of a head in the sand mentality that, if it isn't a problem now, why should we bother sort of solving it, whereas we believe it is a big problem and getting a bigger problem, and something has to be done about it.
For Checkpoint, Michelle Cook.
So what does the Ministry of Education say in response to all of that? Well, it says there are 980 teachers who specialise in learning and behaviour and are skilled to work with children with any additional needs. 19 teachers did the postgraduate diploma in autism spectrum disorder last year, up from 18 in 2016 and 16 in 2015. The Ministry said it's working with the New Zealand School Trustees Association to introduce a dispute resolution process. This would help to manage and resolve any issues between schools and families of children with additional learning needs. It said parents are also able to complain to the Ombudsman's office. It's 10 minutes to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. At least 10 people have been killed and 20,000 evacuated in Northern California in what officials say is one of the worst fire days in the state's history. Firefighters are battling several fires which broke out almost simultaneously across the Napa wine region. Up to 1,500 homes and businesses have so far been destroyed, with residents forced to flee at very little notice. The California governor has declared states of emergency in 3 counties. The BBC's Dave Lee reports from San Francisco.
Fierce winds and low humidity, the perfect conditions for a raging blaze to spread across California's famous wine region north of San Francisco. Dramatic videos posted to social media showed locals desperately fleeing towns that were being engulfed by the flames.
No, stop.
Winds as strong as 70 miles per hour meant the fire spread quickly and unpredictably. What started the initial blaze is not yet known.
11 o'clock, somebody came around honking their horn like just crazy. I was just like, what is going on? And I don't know what inspired me to look out my bedroom window because it's in the back of the house and the car was in the front of the house, but I drew my blinds and I just saw flames all up on the hill behind my house.
More than 14 separate fires covering almost 60,000 acres were being dealt with. A conservative estimate suggested 1,500 structures had been destroyed, many of them people's homes. Evacuation centres were set up for those affected, including several hundred patients at 2 hospitals. The city of Santa Rosa was particularly badly hit. Many homes and a Hilton hotel were burned to the ground.
Every spark's going to ignite a fire, and so regardless of what that may be, wind can start fires, down power lines, vehicles pulling off into the dry grass. All of those things have the potential, and under these kind of conditions, the risk is just extreme of new starts.
California's Governor Jerry Brown has declared a state of emergency in a region which is no stranger to large brush fires. The state's stretched fire crews are also tending to large fires in Southern California. In wine country, authorities prioritise getting people out of harm's way before attempting to tackle the blaze. More than 20,000 people have left their homes, and so attention is now turning to trying to control the fire from the air. Forecasts predict the wind levels will drop, which could make containing the fire easier.
Dave Lee, the reporter, there. 7 minutes to 6. A family who lost their 15-year-old daughter to suicide has made an emotional plea to Parliament for an urgent inquiry into the country's mental health crisis. They delivered a 30,000 signature petition on the steps of the Beehive today as part of World Mental Health Day. Our reporter Charlie Drever talked to them and filed this report.
A mother stricken with grief made up the dozens who attended today's presentation of a petition seeking change for those suffering from mental illness. Hannah Reedy lost her teenage daughter Ariana 2 months ago. Ariana committed suicide after multiple attempts, and Mrs. Reedy says the system repeatedly failed them.
My 7-year-old son saw the first time my daughter tried to kill herself. We got no help from mental health, SIFs, DHB, nothing.
Mrs. Reedy believes her daughter's age also played a role in her lack of care, saying she slipped between the cracks.
There was nothing for my daughter, who was underage. They couldn't put us into the mental unit because she was too young. So where else are they going to put her?
Green Party leader James Shaw received the petition from Hannah Reedy and her husband Api Nasidra. Labour leader Jacinda Ardern also attended, along with other Green Party MPs, the Yes We Can coalition, as well as those with their own personal experiences in dealing with mental illness. A spokesperson for UCAN, which is part of the Yes We Can coalition, Debbie Leyland, believes tragic stories like Ariana's will become increasingly common. She says a radical new approach is needed urgently.
Young people, especially now with all the cyberbullying and everything, need our help. I think it's a good idea having a nurse or a social worker in each school. There's so much pressure on our young people and there's very little hope for their future.
The National Secretary of the Public Service Association, Erin Palachuk, says members are telling them a squeeze on funding is putting increasing strain on those in the mental health sector.
Those pressures mean that they can't deliver to members of the public, members of the community, the types of services that they wish they could. They're afraid that people are falling through the gaps. They're afraid in some cases that people have been turned away at the door who ought to be having care.
Hastings' mother Hannah Reedy hopes no other parent will have to endure her loss, although she has heard many stories similar to her own.
It's horrible, and I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. I still have a problem when I go up and see her. I start saying sorry and things, so yeah, it's not a good feeling to bury your child.
Hannah Reedy hopes the next government will take notice of the 30,000 people who signed the petition and make sure those with suicidal thoughts get the care they need, rather than become another sombre statistic. For Checkpoint, Charlie Drever.
4 minutes to 6. It's the last loop of the circuit for Wellington's iconic trolley buses. Are they iconic? Certainly. I remember them with great affection, with work on taking down the decades-old overhead lines beginning late last night. In 3 weeks' time, the final switch will be flicked and the power shut off once and for all. But today, our reporters Emile Donovan and Richard Tindler hit the roads to check out what passengers and drivers think of the demise of what really is a capital institution.
Just about anywhere you go in Wellington Central City, 82 kilometres of copper wiring snakes overhead like a steampunk racing track. When most of this was first put up in 1949, Peter Fraser was Prime Minister. Nat King Cole was top of the charts and doctors were still sponsored by Lucky Strike cigarettes. And now, 70 years on, it's finally coming down. But not everyone's reaching for the tissues.
My name's Lance Strathern. I've been with NZ Bus for about 8 years. About 3-4 years of that driving, trolleys and diesels, and then the rest I've been inside in the office.
Lance Strathern admits there's a pang of nostalgia when he thinks about the trolley buses entering retirement. But he says there's a unique set of difficulties driving them.
Well, a lot of it is going through the workings, like we're doing now, getting down to the right speed. You've got to look down on the road, what's there and also what's above you. Then also, as a driver, you're looking at your surroundings, what's around you, so it takes a lot more concentration.
That being said, there's no accounting for taste. Here's another driver, Greg.
Yeah, the diesels are very noisy and they vibrate all over the place and they just give you a headache at the end of the day. The trolleys don't.
The call to remove the wiring was made in April last year by the Greater Wellington Regional Council. With the wiring network sucking up $6 million a year, it simply didn't make economic sense to keep them around. They'll be replaced by a blend of diesel and electric vehicles by next July, with plans to convert to a fully electric fleet over the next few years. On the buses today, there were varying views on their demise. From remorse.
Yeah, I'm a bit sad about it. I prefer if they probably stayed, I think, because it's like electricity and stuff, so it's better for the planet.
To nostalgia.
I was just telling my daughters, when I had my babies and you'd go to town with your pram, you had that trouble of the bus driver had to get out and hook the pram on the back. And sometimes they weren't too happy about it.
A lot.
And even relief.
And you won't have the, oh, we've got to stop because there's a loud knocking on the back of the bus and then the driver has to jump out and hook it back up again.
But with at least 3 weeks until all the wiring's taken down, there's plenty of time for sentimentalists to take one last ride on a piece of history. For Checkpoint, Emile Donovan.
A lovely story, Emile, beautifully shot by Richard, and the most striking thing about it all was not only the demise of the trolley buses. Those of us who've lived in Wellington for any length of time will have fond but perhaps mixed feelings about them when the old poles came off, but the extraordinary day in Wellington. The old phrase, you can't beat it on a good day, springs to mind. Look, absolutely
stunning, beautiful.
Looks stunning.
Yeah, unlike here.
Well, you've been in the studio for 30 seconds. It's changed since you entered.
Exactly. We don't know what that big glowing orb in the sky looks like anymore.
God, it's nuts. Anyway, thank you for being with us. It's coming up to 6 o'clock. Katrina has the latest on that crash north of Taupo. Major road closures there and big detours in place. Thank you for being with us. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. A baby is among those injured in a car crash north of Taupo today, which has left 4 people dead and 8 injured. The crash happened at the intersection of State Highway 1 and Tutikau Road 3 hours ago. Of those injured, 2 are critical, with others in a moderate or serious condition, including a 10-month-old baby and a man and a woman in their 40s. Taupo's Mayor David Trevovis says the people involved are believed to be New Zealanders.
The road's still detoured at this stage, so until everything's moved away. But all the deceased and injured, begin taken away as we speak.
Taupo Mayor David Trevovis. The negotiations at Parliament are set to run into the evening as Labour and National try to strike a deal with New Zealand First to form a new government. The pace of the talks is sped up, with Winston Peters' self-imposed deadline of Thursday looming. Winston Peters and his team are in their second meeting with Labour today and are due to meet National again tonight. Mr Peters is giving nothing away, though he did suggest exporters would be pleased with the outcome of the talks. He also now says his Thursday deadline is to make a decision about who New Zealand First will go with, but not necessarily when he'll announce that decision. The former rugby coach of an Auckland teenager who died after fleeing police says he had a hard upbringing. 15-year-old Morocco Tai was killed during the police pursuit of the stolen car he was driving in Otara yesterday. The police say he was caught last month in a car speeding along the wrong side of Auckland's southern motorway. The coach for junior rugby at Hora Hora Club in Whangarei, Corey Paul, says when Morocco joined the team 4 years ago, he was fearless.
He was a really good-natured boy. He was keen to help out, and he was really supportive of the other kids that he didn't know, and really good trait for a kid who was 11. If they had a lot more support at home, and out in the community, we might not get these situations where they steal a car and lose traction and end up crashing and lose a life.
Corey Paul says Morocco regularly move between the homes of family members. An online petition is calling for the new Plymouth District Council to move a pedestrian crossing in Inglewood, where a 7-year-old was killed on her way home from school. Emma Warren was involved in an accident with a truck on September the 27th. A family friend, Adam Fenich, says he started the petition, which has so far had 3,500 signatories, to raise safety concerns about the crossing. Mr Fenich says it's too close to Rata Street, a part of State Highway 3, and dangerous. The council says it's installing temporary barriers at the crossing and conducting a safety audit with the Transport Agency. It says the accident involving Emma Warren was the first at the crossing in the last 10 years. 9 people were arrested at a protest in Wellington today outside a defence conference. About 300 protesters have been blocking entrances to Westpac Stadium since this morning in a bid to stop delegates getting into the conference organised by the Defence Industry Association. The police say 8 people were arrested for obstructing a public road and 1 for disorderly behaviour. Some protesters say they were manhandled by police when they refused to move.
They dragged me across the ground by my backpack. They've been punching people, kicking people, shoving people. It's been absolutely atrocious.
But the police say officers remained professional and acted appropriately, and anyone concerned about their conduct can make a complaint. They say they're disappointed some protesters disrupted traffic, created safety issues and caused delays for the public. Auckland Transport says it doesn't believe nearby construction activity is to blame for a massive slip in a car park. It says heavy rain has caused the damage in the Rawini Road car park in Birkenhead, where about 30 spaces have disappeared. Its Chief Infrastructure Officer, Greg Edmonds, says the car park was built on a landfill site in the 1960s.
The Rawini Street car park has kind of washed away a little bit in the gorge down there in the gully. It appears as if the substrate soil underneath it has fallen away. We've been monitoring this site now for over a year, and some cracks appeared a few weeks ago that we've obviously isolated, but it looks like the structure underneath the car park has actually failed.
Greg Edmonds says engineers need to let the subsidence settle before assessing what to do. The Birkenhead Town Centre Association estimates businesses are losing millions of dollars a year in revenue because of long-standing problems with the well-used car park. It's 6:05. Sport and Team New Zealand's technical head Dan Bernasconi says they're exploring all monohull design options for the next America's Cup in Auckland in 2021. As Cup holders, Team New Zealand can set design rules and has decided against continuing with the catamarans that were used in this year's event in Bermuda, hoping a simpler design will attract more entries. Bernasconi is now working on concept designs for their next boat and says the 75-foot boat is far from being finalised.
We've got sort of concepts at one end, which is a fairly conventional but high-performance monohull, through to semi-foiling monohulls, and then also looking at the other end of the spectrum of, is it possible to get a sort of a really big yacht fully foiling?
Team New Zealand's Dan Bernasconi. New Zealand's triple World Cup winner Emma Jensen will be part of rugby history after being selected in the British Barbarians' first women's team. The former Black Fern will join players from 7 countries playing for the famous invitation-only English club, which was formed in 1890. The women's team will play a Munster side in Limerick next month. And the former Warriors captain Ryan Hoffman is returning to the Melbourne Storm for next year's National Rugby League season. Hoffman started his career with the Storm before heading to the Warriors in 2015 for 3 seasons. The 33-year-old back rower was told earlier this year his Warriors contract would not be renewed after the club signed Tohu Harris. That's the news.
As well as coming out your wireless, Nights with Brian Crump is available online around the world, everywhere from Lagos to Los Angeles.
That's the bass crump, crump moves and the crump finishes that come. Like I say, it's a freestyle, and that means you can come up with moves, you can be creative, you can find the power of the dance, power of the crump energy.
Enter the Crump Zone, radionz.co.nz, or tune in weeknights after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Auckland and Northland, fine spells and a few showers, clearing tomorrow morning. Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, mainly fine, scattered showers, isolated thunderstorms possible from Gisborne to Wairarapa this afternoon. Waikato to Kapiti Coast, including the Central High Country, scattered showers turning to rain overnight with isolated thunderstorms possible, easing tomorrow afternoon. Wellington, fine at first, apart from isolated showers, rain developing tonight, then easing to showers tomorrow afternoon. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, scattered showers today, mainly inland with isolated thunderstorms possible, turning to rain for a time tomorrow morning. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, rain in Fiordland, spreading elsewhere this afternoon or evening with isolated thunderstorms possible in Bulla, easing to showers tomorrow. Otago and Southland, mainly fine but a few showers developing this afternoon, isolated thunderstorms possible this afternoon. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy with rain settling in this afternoon. It is 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten. As Katrina said at the top of the news bulletin, if you've just tuned in, 4 people are dead and 8 people are injured following what was obviously a horrific collision just north of Taupo, about 20k north, State Highway 1, as you are heading before the turnoff that takes you Towards Tokoroa, the police say the accident happened at the intersection of State Highway 1 and Totuko Road. The injured, two of whom are in critical condition, include a 10-month-old baby. A man and woman are in their 40s, and their 40s are also in hospital. Police are still at the scene and say the road will be closed for some time, yet diversions in place. Obviously a busy time of the year because it's the school holidays. We hope to have Superintendent Steve Greeley on the show before 6:30 to update us on the latest. It sounds like it was just at the end of an overtaking lane. Fewer than 3% of the new houses built under the Housing Accord are affordable to first-home buyers, and some Auckland councillors say it's time for the government and developers to step up. Fewer than 3%. The Accord began in 2013, great fanfare at the time, and offered fast-tracking planning to accelerate the construction of affordable homes. The figures have been called dismal and have ignited debate this afternoon about how much of a role the council has in addressing Auckland's housing crisis. Housing affordability. SHAs were meant to be a response to it. Our reporter Tom Furley has been looking at the debate this afternoon.
Prior to today's meeting, the Council's Planning Committee Chair, Chris Darby, told RNZ the figures were a dismal failure in addressing home affordability. That sentiment was shared by many of the councillors, including John Watson, who said progress had been woefully inadequate in the special housing areas known as SHAs.
What's made it worse is that it created the illusion that something was being done. So while we were busily passing all the SHAs, the word affordability had a great currency. Well, there's nothing to show for it, really, just a couple of houses.
The debate turned to a move for council to prioritise investigations by the Mayor's Housing Task Force Steering Group into other ways of filling the gap between social and market rate housing. That could include investigating changes to the unitary plan to force developers to build affordable houses. But the idea of yet another report by council staff didn't appeal to all, including Councillor Penny Holtz.
I think we're cocking this up by making it our problem. We've got reports sitting on shelves in my office, your office, the Deputy Mayor's office that actually have the answer to this. We're just ignoring it. The bottom line is the government is the answer to this. Changing the tax laws are the answer to this. Changing the banking regulations are the answer to this. We are not the answer.
Ms Holtz says Auckland has ring-fenced a parcel of land the size of Hamilton for housing, and that hasn't worked. She said it's now up to the government, developers and the banking sector to see what's getting in the way. However, Chris Darby says the motion didn't suggest council was the single answer, but it had to be involved, given house prices had gone from $530,000 to over $800,000 while the accord has been in place.
This is a problem that we have to acknowledge, not dismiss it and sign it over to some other party. We've got to fess up on this and recognise that the accord failed dismally.
Through it all, however, the independent Māori Statutory Board member, Liani Namani, says there is a good news story to come out of it.
By our figures, 60% of the completed retained affordable housing stock has been produced by mana whenua or Māori-led developments. Now that, for me, that kind of says something to council in terms of where the leadership is lying around the development of affordable housing.
The committee voted to go ahead with investigating new affordability models, with staff expected to report back in the first half of next year. RNZ has also been approached by the Housing Foundation, which led the housing development known as Waimahia. It believes the council may have the figures of affordable houses wrong, and the true number is 158. That would raise the percentage of affordable houses from a mere 2.7% to the slightly higher figure of 4.4%. From Auckland for Checkpoint, Tom Furley.
Questions are being raised about the safety of a pedestrian crossing in Inglewood, where 7-year-old Emma Warren was killed last month while making her way home from school. An online petition, which has so far been signed by 3,500 people, is calling for the New Plymouth District Council, Inglewood is just south of New Plymouth, of course, to move the crossing. Our Taranaki reporter Robin Martin has more.
Emma Warren was cycling home from school on September the 27th when she was involved in an accident with a truck. The outgoing youngster, who loved teddy bears, died at the scene. Family friend Adam Fennick, who set up the petition, says there have been warnings about the crossing in the past.
I had a lady message me who, in '92, when I think she said she was 9, she got hit on that crossing and survived, obviously, and it wasn't moved. They tried at that point. I don't know what avenues they tried, but they tried at that point. It wasn't moved, and here we are, you know.
The crossing at the intersection of Miro Street and Rata Street, which is part of State Highway 3, is little more than a metre from the main road and has no humps or raised curbing. Mr Fenwick says even if it's not directly implicated in Emma's death, it is a hazard and should go.
It's not about whether that was the actual cause of it, but it's definitely not helping. There's a lot of things to watch at that corner for a start, especially in the truck. You've got added things like blind spots and things like that. You've got high fences, trees, poles in the way, a main road, traffic, pedestrian crossing.
Mr Fenwick says ironically, if the crossing had raised curbing, it would have to be set back at least 5 metres from the intersection. No one in Inglewood today had a good word to say about the crossing. Hayley McCleeman, who was out with youngsters Jade and Blake, says it's poorly designed.
It's extremely close to like the main road, like with all the big trucks coming past and stuff. It'd be better if it was moved back maybe, you know, to that bowling bit. It's quite upsetting really. You know, drive past it and the kids ask questions and you've got to kind of explain it nicely. Dog walker Becca Cunningham had a similar point of view.
Obviously, like probably most people, it's far too close to the main road. It's only, what, 1.5 metres of something between the crossing and the main road, and it's just too close for safety, I think.
And have you heard of issues at this place before?
No, to be honest, but I've always thought something's going to happen.
Ms Cunningham says the solution is easy.
Either taken away completely or moved further up the road. There's another crossing, maybe 150, 200 metres up there, which is too far if you're crossing the road here, but this one's too close, so it needs moving just further away.
Mr Fenwick says Emma's parents, Sean and Karen, support the petition, which is targeting 10,000 signatures.
If we can get that that crossing moved, then something, if positive is the right word to use, so something positive has come out of the situation. The family have said if this stops one more kid getting hurt or killed, then it's a good thing.
In a statement, the council says it is installing temporary barriers at the crossing to slow pedestrian traffic and conducting a safety audit with the transport agency. The police are also investigating the accident. The council says following these inquiries, a decision will be made on whether permanent changes are required. It says the Miro Street crossing has been in place for 30 years and the incident which took Emma Warren's life is the first crossing-related accident in the last 10 years. In Taranaki for Checkpoint, ko Robin Martin Tēnei.
It's a long weekend in the United States, but that hasn't stopped the volley of tweets from President Donald Trump. He's been engaged in a very public feud with the influential fellow Republican Bob Corker. The spat complicates things for the Republicans as they try to move a major tax reform package through the Senate, which they control by a margin of 52-48. It is slim. They need all the friends they can get. Most Democrats oppose the plans, and Republicans can't pass it if they lose support from more than 2 lawmakers of their own party. With more, here's the ABC's David Cody.
Even by Donald Trump's standards, it's been a big few days. He's been on Twitter again praising Vice President Mike Pence for walking out of an NFL match. Then there was another comment on North Korea. Our country has been unsuccessfully dealing with North Korea for 25 years, he tweeted, giving billions of dollars and getting nothing. Policy didn't work. Even amid all of this, it's a public feud with a prominent Republican senator that's getting the most attention. Mr. Trump seems to have been irked by comments on Wednesday from Bob Corker, the Republican chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
I think Secretary Tillerson, Secretary Mattis, and Chief of Staff Kelly are those people that help separate our country from chaos.
But it really kicked off on Sunday morning when Mr. Trump accused the senator from Tennessee of deciding not to run for re-election because he didn't have the guts. Mr Corker shot back, tweeting, "It's a shame the White House has become an adult daycare centre. Someone obviously missed their shift this morning." He was happy to elaborate in an interview with the New York Times.
Sometimes I feel like he's on a reality show of some kind. He doesn't realize that we could be heading towards World War III with the kind of comments that he's making.
Bob Corker's colleague, Republican Senator Chuck Grassley, is urging both men to, quote, cool it. But Republican Congressman Charlie Dent is not running for re-election and was happy to speak out in an interview with MSNBC.
Let's be honest, we've had a lot of these the emperor has no clothes moments, and I'm glad that Senator Corker has brought voice to this. We are concerned, my colleagues, my Republican colleagues in the House, I know, and Senate, are concerned by much of the dysfunction and disorder and chaos at the White House.
The spat means Senator Corker may feel more free to be a maverick when it comes to voting. Republicans are desperate to push through tax changes by January. There's also potential trouble for a deal to protect young immigrants from deportation. The White House released a list of new demands for immigration laws late on Sunday. It includes funding for a southern border wall and a crackdown on cities that limit how much local police can cooperate with federal immigration agents. The new demands have alarmed pro-immigration activists and raised doubts that any bipartisan deal could now be reached.
It's David Cody reporting. We've got we're going to go back to this crash north of Taupo. But before that, Iceland has proved that its dream run at last year's European Championship, this is football, by the way, sport was no fluke, becoming the smallest country to ever qualify for the Football World Cup finals. The country of just 330,000 people, what's that, the size of Wellington, roughly, has booked itself its first ever place in a World Cup final after beating Kosovo 2-0 in its final qualifying match in Reykjavik. But tonight, all eyes will be on a match across the Tasman when the national team from Syria takes on the Socceroos in Sydney. The Syrians have been playing and training in Malaysia due to the conflict in their country and have never qualified for a World Cup ever before. Here's the BBC's Chris Letcham.
Reaching the World Cup couldn't be much closer. Both Australia and Syria are just 2 qualifying rounds away from a place in Russia. After a 1-1 draw in Malaysia last time out, Australia are back on home soil on Tuesday, and reaching a 4th World Cup is the only thing on their mind.
What we know is if we win tomorrow night, we're through to the next round, and our objective is to play our football. We want to be aggressive, we want to be attacking, we want to take it to the opposition and test them, and that's what we'll do.
The Socceroos may have home advantage, but as many as 15,000 Syrian fans living in the country could attend the match in Sydney. And despite sitting 25 places below Australia in the world rankings and battling with a depleted squad, Syria are confident they have what it takes to win.
We hope the benches will do well. The absence of 5 players would affect any team, but anyway, my faith and trust is in the players we have, and God willing, the absence of players won't affect them, because their morale and their will is important.
For one team, this will be the end of the road. For the winner, just one final round of qualifying awaits, a playoff against the 4th place team from the CONCACAF Federation, with the World Cup dream still very much alive.
22 minutes past 6, 4 people are dead and 8 injured following a really horrific collision, obviously, just north of Taupo, about 20k north. The police say the accident happened at the intersection of State Highway 1 and Tutuko Road. The injured, 2 of whom are critical, and include a 10-month-old baby, a man and woman in their 40s. Also amongst the injured, they've been taken to both Waikato and Rotorua hospitals. Police are still at the scene and say the road will be closed for some time yet. We had hoped to speak to the police about the road toll, which since Friday is 14 people dead. But the National Road Policing Manager Steve Greeley is on a plane. Joining us now is Police Association President Chris Cahill. He says with more cars on the road, there should be more police. Chris, are you there?
Good evening, John.
Nice to talk to you. I'm sorry it's in these circumstances. Chris, welcome to Checkpoint. What the hell is going on? I think year on year we are, I think with these 4 that have died this afternoon near Taupo, we're about 45 up in terms of a direct comparison with the same time last year, road toll fatalities. That is a huge increase.
Yeah, it's a very big increase. And look, first, my sympathies go out to the friends and whānau of the people who have lost their life today. It's just another tragedy that we don't need in New Zealand. But the reality is there's more cars than ever on the road. They're doing more miles than ever on the road. And conversely, we need more police officers on the road to make it safe. And the evidence is that actually less time has been spent on road policing than has been in the past.
Can you tell me about that evidence? So there is actually data to support that, is there?
Well, if you look at the number of breath screening tests being conducted, the infringement notices being issued for things like seatbelts or using your mobile phone, they've all decreased, which says when there's more people on the road that there must be less work being put into that area. And that's just more evidence how stretched police resources are on the front line.
And of course, the police resources are stretched, which means that not only are there fewer police, as you're saying, issuing tickets, and that's a provable fact, and the ticket numbers, as you're saying, are down indeed for those kinds of offences, but it also involves great strain, stress and grief for the police officers who now have to go and communicate with the families of those 4 people who've just lost their lives north of Taupo, right? Individual officers have got to go and do the door knocks and say, I'm here with the most terrible news.
They've got to do the door knocks with that news. They've got to attend the accidents and deal with the trauma that they see. That fits totally with what we're talking about at our Police Association conference this week, the need to look after their mental health with the trauma they go through. But we'd much rather we could have more officers out there trying to reduce this road trauma, and it just isn't the situation at the moment.
Why do you think the number of police working in traffic is down?
It's really such a competition for demand for the services of police. I mean, at the same time as this is reduced, we've had an increase in the last year of about 8,000 family violence incidents that need to be attended immediately as well. We have an increase in mental health call-outs. The press has just continued to mount, and that's why we've been calling for some time for the need for more frontline staff.
And you've been discussing this at a conference, have you?
We're going to be discussing it at our conference that starts tomorrow. It'll be a key message that we're getting out there, along with the need for looking after the mental health of our members.
Chris, forgive me for asking this question, because I know that you don't want to take a political position, but will it make a difference to you who becomes government on Thursday or Friday, or whenever Winston Peters decrees, we're told? Are there police policies you are interested in?
Look, there certainly are. I mean, all parties have made significant promises about police resources, and we will be making sure whatever government's formed that we hold them to account for those promises. Some are better than others, some are just slightly different, but in the end, we'll make sure that it ends up with more staff on the front line.
Chris Cahill, New Zealand Police Association President, thank you so much, Chris. We really do appreciate it. Chris Mowat, who is a regular correspondent. Lovely to hear from you, Chris. So yet another thing that is the fault of the police. Take some responsibility. People, we are just going to update that. So this is what the police are telling us. Police are able to confirm that 4 people are dead following that collision. It is State Highway 1 and Tutuko Road. It is just north of Taupo. Very, very busy time of the year, obviously the school holidays. 8 people injured, 2 in a critical condition. They have gone to Waikato or Rotorua hospitals. Police are at the scene investigating. The road will be closed for a considerable time. Detours are in place, but if you are travelling through that region and you can delay your travels, it is warmly recommended that you do so. Just before you go tonight, we began this program this evening talking to a 17-year-old boy in Otara who began stealing cars when he was 12. He hopes for a better life for his son, who is turning 1 this weekend. And we spoke also to a social worker in Otara, Sally Paia, who talked about the hopelessness, the despair, the sense of failure that inclines young people to behave with the kind of reckless fatalism possibly displayed by Morocco Tai, being involved in 2 police pursuits in little more than a fortnight. Well, the former rugby coach, that, by the way, is available online now, but the former rugby coach of teenager Morocco Tai, who died after fleeing police in a stolen car yesterday, says Morocco was a good-natured boy with a rocky past. The junior rugby coach for Hora Hora Rugby Club in Whangarei, Corey Paul, says Morocco and his sister joined the team about 4 years ago. He told our reporter Eva Corlett how Morocco would muck in and play hard.
Him and his sister, it both basically came off the street. to find a team to play for. And he was a really hard player. He was really hearty. He didn't, he was into tackles and everything. He didn't care if the kids he was tackling were big or small. And a typical Māori rugby kid, just keen to play the game and enjoyed it. A lot of kids at that age, you get a bit scared, the other bigger kids, but Morocco wasn't the biggest kid in our team by any means, but you just had no fear.
What are your lasting impressions of Morocco?
He was a really good natured boy. He was keen to help out, and he was really supportive of the other kids that he didn't know, and a really good trait for a kid who was 11.
And what did you know of his childhood?
He was kind of a hard luck kid, which I was pretty surprised by the nature of him when he came to us, considering all the stuff that they'd been through. From what I can remember, they'd actually changed quite a few places and been flung right out to family and gone here, there and everywhere. And
as someone who has worked a lot with young people, what do kids like Morocco need?
There could be some more support out there for these kids, and considering the stuff that goes on up these ways in Auckland, it's a lot of whānau support that needs to happen up here. There's a lot of wayward kids here. I think if they had a lot more support at home and, out in the community, we might not get these situations where they steal a car and lose traction and end up crashing and lose a life.
Corey Paul, who was Morocco's rugby coach here, that's Sally Pye's point too, the youth worker who I spoke to, and that interview is available online, that children who are going off the rails need intensive care, intense intervention, someone to watch over them, and there just aren't enough people doing that. Thank you for being with us. We'll be back tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A baby is among those injured in a car crash north of Taupo, which has left 4 people dead and 8 injured. Negotiations continue this evening as Labour and National try to strike a coalition deal with New Zealand First. 9 people were arrested today at a protest outside a defence conference in Wellington. And Auckland Transport doesn't believe construction activity is to blame for a massive slip in a car park in Birkenhead. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Life is Fine is the new album from iconic Australian songwriter Paul Kelly. I'm Nick Bollinger and I'll be assessing how it stacks up against the Kelly classics in the sampler. I'll be discussing an Afrobeat fable from Antebellum and a lost English odyssey reissued after